world whispered the quiet promise of hidden power. In this world, not everyone was born equal. Some carried the whimsical power bestowed upon by the gods, the Shards, mysterious fragments of ancient power implanted in the hearts of young that unleash itself on one's 16th year. These powerful abilities vary: fire, lightning, water, earth, air, crystal, light, and finally, change. But not everyone embraced them or their holders. For years, families like Orn Vespers had led their children to believe that the shards and their holders were dangerous and wanted to corrupt this world. Today, though, Orn's family was kind and loving. It was his 16th birthday, unaware of his weird shard. His family had a huge cake laid out on a wooden table. His family surrounding him. Everything was peaceful, normal. To them, it was just another year, a celebration. "Go on, blow out your candles," Oren's mother uttered, a loving smile on her face. Oren stared at the cake, his hands pressed against the wooden table, his family surrounding him. He knew he should be happy, shouldn't he? It was a day all about him. But something inside of him, a twisted feeling he couldn't quite put his finger on. He clenched his fists, trying to ignore the sickening feeling. But as the candles flickered on his birthday cake, Oren couldn't shake off the feeling that something horrible was about to happen, something life-changing. Oren stood up from his seat, the wooden chair scooting back across the floor, making an unpleasant scraping sound. "I have to go to the bathroom," he said, before turning his heel and sprinting away, rushing towards the bathroom. He entered the bathroom, placed his hands on the doorknob's lock, and locked it, and twisted it, locking the door so no one could interrupt him. He stared into the mirror to inspect himself. What is this dreadful feeling? Am I sick?" he questioned out loud. He raised his arm gently, pushing him against his hair, placing his hand on his forehead, attempting to check his temperature. "It's not a fever," he said, his breath catching pace, struggling to breathe. "But why do I feel so hot?" he said on the brink of hyperventilating. He could feel his consciousness slipping away. His breath slowed, then suddenly it all faded to black. His limp body dropped to the floor. It had been a few minutes and Oren's family began to worry. Oren's older brother, Kael, deciding he would go to check on him. Kael walked to the bathroom, his steps making a gentle sound. Once confronted by the bathroom door, he raised his arms and knocked on the door. "Brother, are you okay? You've been in there for a while," he asked, his tone filled with worry. Oren hadn't given a response. This made Kael even more worried. He knocked again, a bit harder this time. "Oren," he said, his tone still kind, but louder this time. After a few seconds of waiting, Kael's worries switched to light panic. He started knocking heavier, more frantic. After minutes of knocking, Kael was in full panic. He thought something horrible could have happened to his little brother. He tried turning the knob and noticed it was locked. In a state of panic, he acted on impulse and began slamming against the door, attempting to use his body weight to open it. After a little while of trying, the door finally swung open. Kael almost tripped from the sudden opening of the door. He slowly regained his balance and looked down, only to see his little brother on the floor, passed out. He panicked. He closed the door behind him and rushed towards his brother. He crouched down, his knees touching the cold floor. He wrapped his arms around Oren's torso, holding him up. "Oren?" he yelled, shaking Oren slightly, trying not to wake him up without hurting him. Then something extraordinary happened. Kale looked down to see a crystal-like material forming around his brother's arm. His touch jagged and sharp. Kale dropped Orin out of shock, his eyes wide. And suddenly, Orin had awoken. He opened his eyes once again to see his older brother crouching next to him with a panicked expression on his face. Orin, you're finally awake. Are you okay? Kale called out. Orin could barely think straight, his mind foggy. Kale? What happened? Kale lifted Orin up to his feet, trying to avoid touching his arms in fear of the sharp-like crystal coating, stopping him from falling back down. I don't know. I found you like this. He paused before speaking again, his tone cautious. You might want to take a look in the mirror. Orin groaned, attempting to stand up by himself, struggling slightly. He propped himself up with the bathroom counter, pressing his hands against the cold surface. He turned his head to see his reflection in the mirror, which stared back at him, made his heart drop. His iris glowed a faint purple light. His pupils were the shape of a diamond. A shard. He looked down at his arms, coated in the hard like crystal material. He panicked, knowing what this meant. No, this can't be, he said, his voice panicked and fearful. I'm a shard, he exclaimed, just as he uttered the word shard. A small cluster of crystals formed around where his hands rested on the counter, their points jagged and sharp. Kale had been standing behind him, still staggered by the revelation himself. His eyes widened as he saw clusters of crystals swarm around his brother's hands. Orin, calm down, he spoke calmly, attempting to reassure his brother, and trying his hardest not to let the fear in his voice slip through. For his brother's sake, you can't let the others see you like this, okay? He said, his tone very wary. Please, for your sake, calm down and try hiding it. I don't want anything bad happening to you, Kale said, his tone gentle and reassuring. Orin nodded, his heart still racing from the initial shock. He slowed his breathing, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath, attempting to calm himself down. His chest rose and fell. The crystal slowly crumbled away, fading to dust. He opened his eyes to see that his eyes was back to the normal blue that he was used to, but his pupils, they were still diamond-shaped. Hopefully they won't notice, he said quietly. Kale sighed. He placed an arm over his brother's shoulder, leading him towards the bathroom door. Come on, let's go before they get suspicions of your absence. Orin and Kale walked out of the bathroom door, slowly walking together back to the table with the cake on top of it. One's family stared at him with worry. His mother spoke up first. Are you okay, sweetie? Why were you in the bathroom for so long? Orin grabbed the back of the chair and sat down, then scooting up towards the table. Yes, Mother, I'm okay. I was just feeling a bit queasy, he said, his tone cautious. He couldn't let them know the truth. His family were, and always had been, strong anti-shards. Orin stared down at the lit cake, attempting to avoid eye contact, knowing that if anyone saw the shape of his pupils, he'd be done. His mother, Celine, had a worried expression, fearing that something deeper was wrong. She attempted to push off that feeling and continue the celebration. Orin stared at the cake intensely, noticing the flames on the candles racing like a small inferno. He took a deep breath, his chest rising. Then he let out the air, blowing out the candles. His chest fell back down. He wished for only one thing. wish this dreadful curse would wither away and die, he thought to himself, referring to his newfound shard abilities. To his dismay, his powers were still intact. He sighed. After the candles were blown, his mother cut the cake, placing the first intricate piece on a plate, placing it in front of Oren. Oren's mother, father, brother, and sister sat down at the table and ate the cake, enjoying its flavorful taste. Oren couldn't bring himself to eat it when he looked up at the cake, noticing its frosting was slightly off kilter. All he could think of was how imperfect it was, how imperfect he was. His mind raced with thoughts. Crystals began to form once again, corroding the wooden spoon. He quickly noticed the crystal coatings corroding the spoon. He instantly dropped it out of fear. He stood up from the table once more, his chair scooted back and making that same unpleasant sound. "I'm going to bed," he said, before turning his heel and sauntering towards the stairs, leaving a slice of cake unattended. The family looked towards the direction Warren had fled to, worrying for him. The silence in the room was evident. "Can I have a slice?" Warren's younger sister, Iris, said softly, breaking the silence. Shalene sighed. "Sure, honey, go ahead." Meanwhile, Warren was sitting on the edge of his bed. "What am I going to do? I'm a shard. I can't be," he said out loud to himself. His voice was shaky, on the verge of tears. He rested his face in the palm of his hands, trying his hardest not to cry. "Cut it out. It's a minor concern. I just have to conceal it. I'll get contacts," he heard. He said out loud to himself, his voice was so shaky. Suddenly, in the midst of his distress, he heard his bedroom door slowly creak open. "Ah!" He jumped in fright, sharp jagged crystals rapidly forming around his arms again. He looked up to see who was coming in. It was his brother, and he instantly began to calm down. The crystals crumbled away to dust. Please knock next time," he said, his tone anxious but also annoyed. "I'm sorry, I'll knock next time," Cal said, feeling guilty for startling his brother. "May I come in?" he asked, his tone polite. Warren nodded, allowing his brother to access his room. Cal stepped in, closed the door behind him, and locked it, making sure no one could interrupt, similar to what he did. Cal walked over to Oren's bed and sat down on the edge next to Oren, the bed creaking slightly under his weight. Cal turned to Oren, a deeply concerned look on his face. "You know, you can talk to me about it, right? We can figure out what to do together," he said, his tone thoughtful. "No, you need to stay away from me. I don't know how to control this horrible curse. I don't want it doing anything to you. And what if Mom and Dad find out what I am? They'll disown me. They'll kick me out, and you too, for helping me. I can't let you ruin your life for me." Just as he was rambling with a heavy panic in his voice, Kale wrapped his arms around Oren, bringing him in for a warm embrace. Oren's worries soon faded away for that moment. He hugged his brother back, allowing himself to finally cry in Kale's arms. "Shh, just calm your head and get some rest. I promise you'll feel better tomorrow," Kale said softly while slowly releasing his brother from the embrace. Oren nodded, wiping the tears off his face. Kale stood up and started walking towards the bathroom door, grabbing the doorknob. Just before leaving, he turned back to his brother. "Good night," he said, his tone still kind. Then he left the room, closing it behind him, leaving Oren alone again. Ron took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling. He laid down on his bed, taking in the softness of his mattress. He shut his eyes, trying to get some rest, slowly succumbing to his slumber.